Before we get into today's episode, I have to tell you about Girlboss Daily, your must-read career newsletter. It's completely free and delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday. Each send is packed with leadership advice, future of work news, productivity inspo, and wellness tips. Pretty much everything you need to navigate your 9 to 5 and your 5 to 9 with a little more clarity and a lot more confidence. Finally, a newsletter you'll actually look forward to and might even share with your boss. Join over 100,000 ambitious women who are finding success on their own terms and sign up at newsletter.girlboss.com or head to the show notes for the link.
Here's the quick and dirty on the resume. You should have an executive summary that basically sums up who you are. So when I'm reading it in 6 seconds, I should know, what have you done? Mm-hmm. How have you done it? And what were the results? Like basically, what were your greatest of all time moments?
Right.
If you don't have numbers on your resume, meaning from a cost saving or a revenue generation perspective, and you have no proximity to those, again, that's the proximity thing that I was talking about, the access. If you don't touch any of those things, then your resume is going to be pretty generic.
Welcome back to another episode of Ambition 2.0, the new podcast from Girlboss, where we explore what it really takes and costs to have it all in work, life, identity, and self. I'm your host, Amanda Goetz, 2-time founder, 5-time CMO, mom of 3 with 1 on the way, and the author of the book, Toxic Grit, How to Have It All and Actually Love What You Have. Today's guest is Deepali Vyas. She is an executive recruiter, certified executive coach, and one of the most followed career voices online with a book coming out at the end of this year. She spent 25 years inside the world's most powerful boardrooms, advising Fortune 500 companies, hedge funds, private equity firms on their most senior leadership roles. And today we're going to really uncover all the behind the scenes of what it really takes to land your dream job and how to navigate today's career market. Deepali, welcome to Ambition 2.0.
Thank you very much. So excited to be here.
So we always start every episode with the same question. What does it mean to be ambitious today, and how do you feel like it's changed over your career?
So I think ambition, the old ambition, as people understood it, was climbing the ladder. I want power. I want money. I want the office. I want the title. Mm-hmm. I think modern ambition is more about optionality, designing your portfolio, being in control of your narrative. You're not tied to one logo. So it's not a career ladder. It's more of like a spider web of network.
Okay, we're gonna dive into that. So you spent 25 years inside executive search at various firms. How did you first break into that world? Like, what prompted you to want to go into search?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about search. I had no idea that it was even a career. And so I started in management consulting. I hated it from day one. I was like, I'm building PowerPoint slides and I have no idea what the heck is going on or who this is actually relevant for. And I had grown up in a motel business. So I was at the age of 13 on the front desk of my family's motel, and hundreds of thousands of people over the years I had encountered. And so I knew there was something about people that I understood and liked, had no idea about exec search, and had this management consulting job, decided this is not for me. I need to find something else.
Yeah.
Quit my job, moved to New York. No job, no apartment, no nothing, just, a bit of savings. And I started interviewing, and someone that was sitting across from me, a recruiter, said, "Why don't you try recruiting?" And I was like, I don't know what that is.
What kind of job were you going after?
I mean, I was getting the obvious interviews because my resume was, management consulting. Yeah. So they're like, "Oh, why don't you there's a job at Oracle, and, there's a job at Comcast," and like, just like the consultative part within that organization, or like in strategy or something. And I'm like, no, thank you.
So that one conversation changed the trajectory of your entire career. Isn't it wild that there's like one linchpin in your life? I had one of those when I was in high school. I almost followed my high school boyfriend to his college, and I had a counselor go, You mean you don't want to go to the place where you got a full academic ride? I'm like, okay. So you've said a couple of times, like, I wasn't supposed to be in the room. Can you elaborate on what do you mean? Like, what did that feel like early in your career? And how do you see that playing out kind of with women in their careers as well?
So recruiting gave me, in my mind, a backstage pass to everything that was going on sort of behind the scenes, in the boardrooms, in the comp discussions, in the succession plans, all of that. And when I say I wasn't meant to be in the room, it's because I was in the world of finance on Wall Street. It's male dominated. Very few people look like me. And I'm in the room and listening to these conversations and definitely underestimated because I didn't look like them.
Yeah. Did you see that as a superpower or did you see that as kind of a kryptonite?
1,000% superpower. One, I was memorable because I was not like them. But two, when they spoke over me or, basically just ignored me when I was in the room, I listened a lot harder and I was looking at patterns and I was able to absorb so much that all of that came to me. So when I was ready, I was like, I already know what's going on. Like, I know the deal.
Yeah. So at what point did you realize that talent alone isn't enough?
Yeah. Very early, actually. And that was one of the reasons where I talk a lot about visibility. A lot of people think I'm talented, I'm excellent, my performance speaks for itself. It doesn't, because your talent alone will not get you to where you want to go because there's a whole ecosystem that's happening around you. And people tell me all the time, Deepali, I don't want to be political. I'm not asking people to be political. I'm asking them to be aware, right? Aware of where's the influence map, who's doing what, who cares about what you're doing. And so we have those conversations all the time, like, oh, my manager is not listening to me. And it's okay, well, what's your manager's manager care about?
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of influence I'm talking about.
Why do you think people really feel scared to do the skip level?
I think it's because either most of the time, they are with a very insecure boss. And that insecure boss wants complete control over what is going on or what's communicated. And so oftentimes people are like, if I go around my boss, I'm going to have some reciprocal effect and it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
And so what I say is be strategic. One, it's about narrative. You're owning your narrative. It's about visibility. So you know what? Like the biggest corporate truth that I tell people all the time is your manager is not your mentor.
No.
Sometimes they are if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But the truth is they're not your mentor. They have their own agenda. They're working on their own career. They don't care about what's going on with you. So think about going around them in a very thoughtful, visible way where you are showing your impact as it relates to the entire enterprise, not just that manager.
So the fastest accelerating time in my career started when I started an email every Monday called Managing Up Monday. And I literally titled it. And it was Managing Up Monday date. And in that email, I'd say some wins from the previous week, some things we're focused on for this week, and any roadblocks. It was very simple, just bullet point, bullet point, bullet point.
Perfect.
I would send that up to my boss. And then maybe like if we wanted first team, like if I needed line of sight into any first team for her, but then I would also forward it sometimes as an FYI to her boss or somebody else that had not more influence, but influence in the company in my career. And that allowed me to keep the respect of like, she's informed and also just an FYI to other people. And that continued to accelerate. People were like, oh, I didn't realize you guys were doing that. Or like, great win, let's celebrate that over here. And I just think that influence map that you talk about and how to access it while navigating the politics game.
You did it exactly right. That is the playbook. So people that are afraid, that whole FYI softened the communication to your skip level manager, right?
Yeah.
That is what I call in my world the power memo. right?
Mm.
It's to the point, bottom line up front, which we call bluff, and just say the things that you need to say, and that's how you manage up. And you wouldn't believe, Amanda, how many people do not take advantage of that. Do you know how easy that is to do?
It's so
It
easy.
takes 5 minutes to do.
Yeah. And it became just part of my operating rhythm. Every
Exactly.
Monday, sending that out. So that way it never felt like out of the blue.
Yeah.
If I really was like going to give a little humble brag on something, it was just like, oh, this
And it doesn't
win.
feel cringy.
No,
right?
It just is happening.
There was a guy that I just spoke to, and he was in a similar situation where he's sort of senior director, my VP, I want to go to the SVP, etc. He just started doing a little super mini podcast in their Slack channel. So it's basically like a little voice memo. And he's like, hey guys, this is, Charlie's, Friday wrap up. And that stuff went so viral in the company that like everyone loved hearing about it. And I'll tell you, like, things like this, it's you think it's really obvious. Like when my kid goes to camp, you can't have any contact with the camp. But parents are freaking out. Like, what is my kid doing at that camp? Yeah. Well, that camp ends up doing these weekly podcasts and it's audio only, but they're talking about you. So you're just listening for your kid's name. Now imagine you take that piece and you put it in your corporate life. People are waiting to hear, what are they going to say about my team or this win or whatever? And it feels less cringy.
Yeah. I love that you talk about visibility over ability because that is so true. I know so many people and have seen so many people that go further and faster just because they stay visible.
100%.
So you talk about an access gap, not a talent gap. So I guess that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is there anything else you want to elaborate on there?
Well, I think like just expanding on, everyone has talent, right? Everyone has really great skills. They're doing their job and, you take pride in that work. I think the access gap is just the proximity in which people can see that work, right? And making yourself available and putting yourself in the room. So, that cross-functional initiative, get yourself in that room. If you have something really great that you've learned, do a lunch and learn for the company, right? So it's about access and getting yourself invited to those meetings because those are the meetings where performance gets decided well ahead of time. Who's going to take on what, right? The promotions, those sort of sidebar conversations when your name is being said, that's the proximity you want. You want to be in those rooms.
What surprised you most about the executive hiring decisions? Like, what were you kind of like, oh, didn't see that one coming?
It's a little bit more emotional than you think, right? They are definitely doubling down on EQ. So when I'm in the boardroom and we're talking about a CEO succession or whatever it is, and the people's names it's not just about competence, like I keep saying. It's about, will they be calm under pressure? Can they interact with the board? Are they, sort of the person that you can trust? Trust is a big one. And I'm not sure how, there's no formula to get that across, right? But those are some of those intangibles that are not technically related at all, right? You can be completely awesome at your job, but if you don't have those intangibles, and that's the emotional stuff that's being discussed that you would never know behind closed doors.
I think that in a world where all the headlines are like AI, you must know AI, you have to it's the EQ part that people
1,000%.
are missing. Do you agree?
100%. Because I think that you can be as modern in the tech stack as you want to be, but if you can't communicate that, that's the biggest problem. And I would say executive presence. Sometimes people say they don't have the executive presence or that polish. What they really mean is that this person is not communicating with clarity, that we can trust them, that they can get this job done. Or if stuff hits the fan, is this person going to be flustered or are they going to take the reins and communicate what we want out into the market?
You say most professionals are playing checkers with their careers and they need to be playing chess instead. What does that look like?
So when I talk about checkers and chess, it's I think about it in this way. Checkers is you're task oriented, You are doing your work.
Yep.
You're thinking about your next move. You're thinking about it sort of internally, right? Chess is when you're thinking about who do I need to influence externally and internally, and where is my next exit?
Mm.
Exit versus move is a very different play, right? So I'll give you an example. Um, when people are just internally focused and they're saying, I'm going to climb the ladder, I want to go from senior manager to director to VP, they are just focused on that. What they're not doing is building their external branding in the market. So now they have no leverage, right? So if you start, let's say, posting on LinkedIn, you start being a thought leader, you start going on these panels, you start doing all of this stuff externally, you're building brand equity, not only for the logo you work for, but for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's chess. Because what happens is some other firm will say, you know what, I really love what you're doing. I want to, hire you. You then have leverage in your company saying, hey, listen, I have another opportunity. These are the things that I want to do here. Leverage that.
Yep.
That's chess.
One of the biggest kind of catalysts in my career for playing chess was really, I hit a kind of a pay wall where they said they couldn't pay me more. And I said, well, I want to be media trained and I'd like to start speaking on panels.
Love it.
And that opened up so many doors later in my career that I couldn't even count. So I think that that is brilliant. And you said recently on a social post, I wrote this down, you said the following: for how to win in 2026, leave when you're winning. That feels scary because usually when somebody's thriving in a moment in their career, they're like, well, I'm killing it here. I'm going to stay here. So say more about that.
I did. I left when I was winning. I was at the number one public executive search firm in the world, running a global team, top of my game. And there was a moment where I'm like, I can keep doing this and I can do it forever.
Mm-hmm.
And, nothing will change and I will have a really great life. And I was completely winning there. And I said, you know what? I got to take this to a different level. And so when I started on social media and all of this stuff happened, I didn't realize how happy I could be, even though I was quote unquote winning so much on the other side. Right. And so other things happened for me where, like you said, keynotes and speaking engagements and all the stuff that I was not really even remotely thinking about,
right,
winning in my own seat. Right. When people leave when they're at the top, it's like, every TV show, you want to exit out on top, right? Like the Seinfeld moment. When you're winning, people keep you at that level, right? They see you at that peak. So the next move you make, it's from that peak. It's not on your downturn. And so that's why you leave when you're winning.
Okay. I want to get into the what's happening behind closed doors. What really gets discussed when somebody is thinking about hiring for a job? What are some of those closed door conversations that you think would help the Girlboss audience?
Okay. So first of all, behind closed doors, there's a couple of things that happen. One is, clearly they're just checking the box in terms of your competence. But what they're also thinking about, that trust factor that I mentioned. The other thing is, if you have that type of boss, they're going to be thinking, is this person going to outshine me?
Yeah.
Are they going to basically have parity in terms of compensation with me in a very, small amount of time? The other part is, can I put them in front of a client? Do they have commercial DNA? Like, these are, again, all the intangibles that you have to walk a fine line. And I love that your podcast is called Ambition, right? Because we are all ambitious people. People that are listening to you are on that track. I think you have to understand where that gray area is and know when ambition can work for you, but being over ambitious may work against you, especially in an interview setting. So know when to tamper it a bit and be extremely self-aware. Like, you'll get the indications from a boss when they're asking you, or hiring manager when they're asking you these behavioral questions, because they want to know, how are you going to act under pressure? How are you going to outshine them? How are you going to communicate? Are you going to defer to them, etc.? And so, like, that's the kind of stuff that they're looking out for. That's the closed door conversations.
So deference is something that they're also kind of looking for.
They are. They don't want you to come in and just like a bull in a china shop,
and
right?
be like, I know everything. Yeah. So don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I can do this job. I got it. No problem. And there's no humility in it. Like when I'm in the room, literally, like when I'm doing a search and a client, after they've seen a number of candidates from me, they'll say, you know what? I felt like that person was a little too much. And like, they won't say more. Like that's all I have to work with, And so imagine I have to give constructive feedback to my candidates saying, you're a little too much. Well, explain how. And that, I think self-awareness is probably the number one most critical skill. And people think they're self-aware, but most of them aren't.
I think humility is a big one, especially in interviews. Let's take a step maybe up the funnel for a second. Resumes. There's been a lot of layoffs. If someone is right now in that moment of trying to get their resume out there, what are some common mistakes you're seeing?
Yeah. The biggest mistake I see is everybody wants to put every single thing that they've ever done on that resume.
Yeah.
And I tell them to stop that. Like, no one's going to read beyond the second page of your resume. I promise you.
Are there more than 2-page resumes out there?
Can I tell you, Amanda, I've seen 16-page resumes.
Whoa. Like, a dissertation on
basically it was a PhD. And I'm like, guy, please don't do that. Just have a hyperlink to all your stuff that you want.
A portfolio.
Exactly. And so, but even though, like, I still think people want it, they usually have like 3 or 4 pages on their resume, because they still want to jam pack so much stuff. So here's the quick and dirty on the resume. You should have an executive summary that basically sums up who you are. So when I'm reading it in 6 seconds, I should know, what have you done? How have you done it? And what were the results? Like, basically, what were your greatest of all time moments?
Right.
If you don't have numbers on your resume, meaning from a cost saving or a revenue generation perspective, and you have no proximity to those, again, that's the proximity thing that I was talking about, the access. If you don't touch any of those things, then your resume is going to be pretty generic. And so I say, give me 3 lightning facts. Give me 3 things that you did in each of your roles. That's all I'm looking for.
That's a great one. 3 lightning facts. In the current landscape, we're in a moment where layoffs, AI, economic shifts, they just feel constant. So what does career resilience look like today and really mean right now in today's climate?
So I would say career resilience is around skills. Building skills, stacking your skills, and having them be transferable. Because when you are in a function, you know exactly what you're doing in that function. And when you're stacking these skills, you can go to different industries. So when, the macroeconomic conditions are weighing heavily in the financial markets or the tech market, healthcare and manufacturing and others are booming. And so think about your skill stack and think about how you can transfer them. That is career resilience.
You know that group chat with your work besties where you're sending memes, ranting about your boss, and secretly sharing job links? That's literally Girlboss on Instagram. We've got over 2 million ambitious women bonding over corporate life with a sprinkle of pop culture, and honestly, the comments alone are worth it. Come join us at Girlboss. It's a fun time. You also say pretty often, always be interviewing. Say more about that, because I think somebody who maybe just like they're in a job, maybe they were trying to find a job for a while and they're exhausted and they're like, okay, I can like settle into this. You're saying keep going.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in this, because here's the thing. Again, one of my corporate truths is that, loyalty to a company does not serve you well. you're seeing it. There's a slow drip of layoffs. It's all a numbers game to them.
Mhm.
So think about what they're doing for you versus what you're doing for them. And my point is, if you have an ear to the ground and you're always sort of interviewing, or at least,
Mhm.
substitute interviewing with networking,
Yeah.
right? If you're always doing that, you will never get caught off guard. So let's say there is a downsizing in your company.
Mhm.
You've already had this amazing, robust network that you can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I'd love to kind of cash in that chip that we
Yeah.
talked about. And that's what happens. I'll give you a perfect example. I work for a company right now. I have my day job,
Yeah.
exec search. Yesterday at 5:30 p.m., I received a call from another, founder of another boutique search firm, and she was like, "Listen, I just want you to be on my radar." I took that call. I'm in no, need of anything.
Yeah.
But I think she's brilliant. I think she's growing her firm. I may need her in a completely different capacity. I don't
No
know.
idea.
But I took the call. I always take the call.
Always take the call. And to get tactical, I'll lift the hood into my process. I have a CRM. When I say CRM, it's a Google Sheet. And it is a list of people that I have met along the way in my career. Maybe they were mentors. Maybe they were someone I worked with that I was like, you have power, you have influence. I'm going to follow where you go and just kind of check in. That is how I landed my current CMO job. I was in New York for the summer, grabbed a coffee with an old VC that I had pitched one time. They didn't even invest in my company, but I liked her. And she was like, oh, you know what? We're actually looking for like a consultant. That consultancy turned into a full-time offer. And it's literally it feels overwhelming to say like always be networking. But if you actually make it tactical and put some goals around, it's like, I'm going to have one informative, informational, or just like fun catch-up coffee a month. That's 12 conversations that can impact your career.
Absolutely. And you turbocharge that. I love that. I love that because LinkedIn is a place where, everyone's just kind of like, hey, I know you, but I don't know you, and all of that. But this is really tactical, right? And I'm going to borrow this and I'm going to put it in my newsletter for sure. But I think that the supercharge to that is sort of my 5 by 5 by 3 rule, which is, how long does it take you to do a text?
30 seconds.
Right. So imagine just take 5 minutes to send out 5 texts to people that were in your network, either they were weak ties or whatever. Yeah. And you do that 5 days a week and think about taking 3 meetings, right? So it's 5, 5, 3, especially if you're on the market, right?
Right.
If you turbocharge your playbook in that environment, I guarantee you will land something very quickly.
Yeah, this is the shoot your shot. Like you will miss all the shots you don't take. And so you have to increase that luck surface area. I love that. 5 by 5 by 3. Now let's move into you're in a job. How do you become indispensable at work? Like, and is that even the right goal for somebody?
So I would say indispensable is good in the beginning, but dangerous over time, because you don't want to just be the go-to person for
everything,
fixing stuff.
Yeah.
And exactly. Just like you are going to be seen as the execution person of all of those things and sort of a dumping ground for other people to like just take care of stuff. To lift yourself out of that, you need to be focused on impact, right? So less tasks and more impact. Like, what did you do here and why did it matter? So I have this like really cool trick for people. When they are in their role and anything that they do, I say, apply the so what filter 3 times. So if you say, okay, I did this tasks, I say, so what? Well, I did this and it affected this team. So what? Okay, well, we saved, this amount of costs in this, team. That right there is what needs to get communicated. So you don't get stuck here doing all the tasks. That's it. That's the trick.
And that's what you put in your managing up Monday.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to the behind the scenes for a second. When layoffs happen, what criteria is actually being weighted and discussed?
Okay, so this one is a little bifurcated. Sometimes CEOs take advantage of whatever the macroeconomic conditions are, and no good CEO wastes that opportunity. So they will just do a haircut.
Yeah, it's a clean house.
It's just a numbers thing. And whether you fall above or below that, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then the other part of it is a bit more strategic. And so they'll look at, again, people that have come with counteroffers, people that have been, making noise, people that are less strategic. Those are the conversations that happen behind the scenes. So if you have gone to your boss and said, I have this other offer, and you've done that not once, but twice, they're going to like, you know what, this person's not really loyal. They're getting all these interviews and offers and they're threatening, and they've been getting all of these raises because of that leverage. We no longer need them.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope because you want to feel competitive and that you are pushing to get the raise, but you can't be seen as too noisy.
Right. But then you know what? Bite the bullet. If you were out there and you interviewed and you got that offer, the second time around, I always say, use that bullet once within your current company. That's my rule of thumb. But the second time, take the other offer.
Yeah, that's great advice. What's one thing you wish everyone understood about getting hired?
I would say making sure that you know exactly what you're walking into.
Say more.
So getting hired is sort of the easy part. You're going to do all this performance theater in the interview, and you're going to say all the best things and all of that. And then when you get in there, you're like, oh my God, what the heck did I just walk into?
Yeah.
And so I think the getting hired part is really more focused on you doing as much diligence as you can as they are on you. And I think that's when sort of the psychological and power shifts, because when you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you and you're asking all the best questions, they want you even more, And so getting hired is, that's sort of the table stakes part. But if you're thinking about what is really going on in this team, so asking or also, I would say, seeing who gets promoted, who is getting fired, like understand all of those dynamics. So then you understand what you're walking into from a culture perspective as well, right?
What's a good culture pulse question you could ask in an interview?
So I would say, in the last 3 months, who has gotten promoted at this company, and tell me why and what behaviors did they exhibit?
I was just thinking, like, as a hiring manager, like how I would answer that. That's a great question. Okay. Anything else like to within your interview? Because I do think that when you are operating from a place of scarcity and like you are shipping your resume out to hundreds of people, you're doing 553, when you finally get to that final interview stage, you are in the mindset of like, I'd be so lucky to work there. And you're saying you got to flip it on your head. They'd be so lucky to have me. What are some other kind of poignant questions that you see that really help somebody stick out?
I would do something different. I would present a 30, 60, 90-day plan saying, I've heard everything that you've said. I've absorbed everything. Here's what I've heard. And here's my plan of attack over the next 30, 60, 90 days, and maybe a year out as well. I want to understand what success looks like here. And this is how I would project how I would go about things. Now, don't take this as gospel, but this is based on all the data that I've collected during this interview process.
I would hire that person on the spot. I'd be like, wait, you just did my job for me. If you're already doing that and you're not even hired, like, let's go.
That's the killer.
Oh my goodness. There's so many things here. I want to move to rapid fire. Okay. Cover letters. Do they matter anymore?
No.
Okay. Gosh, I'm old.
Honestly, I'll do a little disclaimer here. Everybody is writing basically in text format, right? So when I receive information, I get your resume, I scan it for 6 seconds. I go into your note that you send me, and it's not like a long diatribe email. I'd rather just understand, hey, here are the last 3 things that I've done really well. I'm not open to relocation, or I am.
Mm.
I want remote or hybrid or in person, and here's my compensation range.
Mm.
Do you know how that makes my life so much easier?
Yeah. I think we're hearing a through line here of if you can make the person on the receiving end, if you can make their life easier, you're going to move faster than anybody else.
That's when I like the whole point of like when I say own your narrative, this is what I'm talking about. Because what happens is when you send a resume and you have this long cover letter or whatever, those people are starting to make assumptions about you. Right. And so when you just get in front of that saying, hey, listen, I was laid off. There was a restructuring. Here's what I'm really good at. Here's what I bring to the table. These are all my requirements. You let me know if you want to have a conversation. Yeah. Straight to the point. You've owned it. You are not digging yourself out of a hole and trying to get to neutral because they've made assumptions about you.
I recently interviewed somebody and they were a part of a riff and they told the story. They were like, yeah, we had a reduction and I continued to work so hard even through the time, even knowing that they extended me for another 6 months. And I was like, that just showed that despite a bad business climate that they had to make a tough decision, you kept showing up. That's somebody I want on my team.
That wasn't so rapid fire, but
yeah. Anyway, we'll keep going. Okay. Cold outreach on LinkedIn, effective or usually ignored?
If it's generic, ineffective. But can I tell you, Amanda, like people are so underutilizing this. Send a voice note or a video.
Okay.
No one's doing it. I can tell you, I get thousands of LinkedIn messages.
Yeah.
The ones that stop me in my track are doing something a little different.
Okay. What actually gets a resume notice? You touched on this a bit, but
there's a lot more white space on the resume. I have those 3 lightning facts about everything that you've done in at least in your most recent history. It's not too long, and that executive summary is sharp.
Okay. What kills a candidate's chances instantly?
If you are sloppy, verbose, and just don't have your stuff together. Oh, and your resume does not match your LinkedIn.
Ooh. Why does that feel like a red flag?
Because oftentimes, no, it's not oftentimes, it's all the time. You are cross-referenced on LinkedIn as sort of a source of truth. And so chances are people are just trying to figure out, do I know somebody in common with them or whatever? They do check that stuff. And then if your story doesn't corroborate with the resume that you're sending in, you're toast.
This isn't on my list, but now I'm curious. Who should you be like trying to get in front of more, the hiring manager or the HR manager?
I would say both in different ways, right? HR more from a process and protocol perspective, and hiring manager of like, hey, I can really do XYZ for your team. I'll give you a perfect example, and I know we're rapid fire, but like this is really important. There's a guy that did not have a formal degree. He's super creative, super technical, and he's like, listen, Deepali, I really want to work for this company, but like I feel like they're not going to I don't stand a chance. And if I send my resume to HR is going to look down and say, hey, he doesn't have a formal degree. You're out. So what I told him was, go ahead and send your resume into HR with that, whatever role that you're applying for. Go and figure out who the hiring manager is, which he did. He ended up going on Twitter, tweeting this hiring manager saying, listen, I've used your product for a long time. Here's what I've done with it. I don't have, formal education in this, but here's all of my portfolio of work. That guy was like, come in. I want to interview you. He got the job 2 weeks later.
Incredible. What's the most effective way to get a hiring manager's attention? You've said like break through the noise, send the video, send the audio notes, send the tweet.
Exactly.
Okay.
Those are the things. You just have to, and again, be really to the point with them, right? Like a friend of mine wrote to somebody on LinkedIn of a company that she was following, and this guy had put out a lot of interesting sort of LinkedIn posts. So even commenting on that potential hiring manager's LinkedIn post saying, hey, really interesting. Here's what I think. And then DMing them saying, by the way, I've done this in my portfolio. You might be interested. I'd love a conversation.
You keep hitting on visibility over and over again, which I think is a huge takeaway. What's a subtle interview red flag from the interviewer and then interviewee?
So the subtle interviewer red flag is them being completely disheveled, saying that, they're working and they're burning out, or there's a lot of, things on fire. We're not making deadlines. Like sometimes in an interview, they get very candid. So if I was a candidate, I'd say, well, why aren't you making those deadlines? Or, what is causing these pain points, et cetera. And I think people that come completely unprepared, that there's stuff going on in that organization. And that's why they didn't take time to read the resume. They didn't take time to know anything about me. And they're just, calling it in.
It's funny. I think about when I'm interviewing someone, when they talk about how toxic their work environment is, it's hard for me not to assume that they've absorbed some of that toxicity, especially if they've been there for a long time or that's the only career move that they've had.
Absolutely.
So you have to be cautious.
Absolutely. And so that's the flip side to the interviewee, right? That subtle red flag is how much crap they're talking about their current organization or where they came from, because you're right. It either could have been absorbed or they were completely disruptive and disillusioned by everything. So can they change, or can they, be reinvigorated again?
Yep. What makes someone promotion ready?
Initiative.
What's one phrase you wish candidates would stop saying?
Passionate.
Okay, amazing. Deepali, where can people find you and learn more about all of your corporate truths?
Well, thank you so much. I'm the Elite Recruiter on Instagram and TikTok, and DeepaliVyas.com.
Amazing. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Ambition 2.0. Let us know in the comments, what questions you have about career search, finding a job, staying in a job, finding your next job. We want to make sure we're answering all your questions here, and we will see you next time.